A quick content warning before we get into this episode. There will be discussion of domestic violence and sexual assault, so viewer discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome back to Cut the podcast. I'm Caitlin, and I'm here today to do another edition of a book that has been turned into a movie. Last year I did this for Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. That is still on Amazon Prime, so if you have not seen that book to movie review, go check it out. I have it linked down below. So let us know what you think. But based on the success of that video, I figured it was only fair that I talk about the next major book to movie adaptation, which is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. So I originally got this book, I want to say 2 years ago. I, as many people have seen this all over the internet, so I was very intrigued, but I was aware from the beginning about what this book is about. So that's a little warning for you all. This book, as I mentioned at the beginning, discusses domestic violence, sexual assault. It is a very heavy book, so if that's not something that you would like to read or expose yourself to, I wouldn't really recommend this book. It goes into quite a bit of detail, but if you think you can handle it, I definitely recommend the book and the movie. Had a great time with it. And just to start off the episode, I'm going to be talking about the book solely. So like I said, I got this 2 years ago. I don't quite remember how I felt about it when I first read it, but I do remember feeling nervous to read it. I had a lot of preconceived notions about what the book was about and how it was going to be. So if anything, I think I made the book out in my head to be as dark and depressing and graphic as it could be. So when it wasn't nearly as bad, I was like, okay, this book is fine. But upon rereading it, I do genuinely enjoy it. I rated it a 4-star. And let's just hop right into it. There will be spoilers, so please be aware of that as we go into it. So, quick summary of what the book's about. It Ends With Us stars Lily Blossom Bloom, our main character here. She recently moved to Boston and is sort of dealing with the one transition to living in a new environment, one opening up her own business, meeting new people, getting into relationships, but also trying to heal from the past. She has not gotten closure from a relationship she had with a boy named Atlas while she was in high school, and her father recently passed, and her father was abusive to her mother. So she's dealing with a lot from the past while also trying to take on what the future has to offer for her. So she's in this transition period, and so it leads to a lot of things that happen in this book. She first meets Ryle, who is primarily the main love interest in the book, but obviously it kind of switches up when Atlas comes back into the picture. She meets Atlas again in Boston. And so I don't want to say it's a love triangle, but it has certain elements of it, especially being jealous that there is another male in the picture who might take Lily and be together instead. So there is that element as well, but it's really not anything like traditional love triangles, especially since for a while there, Lily is only with Ryle, and she's just sort of getting closure with Atlas. It Starts With Us, the second book, the sequel to this, is actually more about Lily and Atlas's relationship post Ryle. But I won't be talking about that book today. Let's be talking about this one. So I wrote just a few notes down of some major glaring things that were different from book to movie. This and It Starts With Us are the only Colleen Hoover books that I've read. So I don't have 100% knowledge on the entire scope of her work, but I've heard some people complain that she is prone to romanticizing situations that are toxic, abusive, wrong. Again, I have no specific confirmation or examples of that. That's just simply what I've heard. So I had that kind of preconceived notion as well. So I think that's why It Ends With Us, I know, can be a little bit controversial, and I think that's primarily because domestic violence as a topic, you mostly see it in black and white, in the sense, not necessarily that this is good and this is bad, like that sort of thing, but more so the psychology of the person that's involved in a relationship, either man or woman, abuser, or not, and even in relationships where it's two men, two women, etc. I think there's a lot of gray area that people don't talk about when it comes to domestic violence as a subject, which I think Colleen attempts here. And what I found interesting doing some digging on why she wrote the book to begin with, she based it off of her own family's story, her own parents' story. Her father was an alcoholic and abusive towards her mother. Mother ended up divorcing him, and so she got to know him outside of the context of, oh, he's just abusive. So she got to know him as an individual. She had a relationship with both of her parents. So I think that's also why she wanted to address it with more of the gray area. So that's why I think a lot of times in the book, you actually can see Ryle as a good person. It's not necessarily that you're just seeing these excuses and being like, oh, okay, like I get why she stayed. More so, he genuinely seems like he acknowledges that what he's doing is wrong and wants to get help. He mentions it multiple times in the book, which I found was interesting, that was not included in the movie, is he mentions how he's been in therapy, that he knows he has anger management. He knows that when he gets angry, he blacks out. He knows what he thinks in the moment as he's about to hurt her, but doesn't really do anything to stop it. So I thought that was really interesting. Obviously that is very hard to translate on the screen, and there's only so much time that you have. So I definitely understand why that was cut out. But they still did a pretty good job in the movie, kind of acknowledging that he knows what he's doing is wrong, but we'll talk about that in the movie review section. But I just thought that was like a very interesting thing that we didn't get to see in the movie, was this sort of internal battle, especially because the book kind of has 3 different phases of the abuse, 3 major moments that are highlighted. And after the 3rd and final one, that is arguably the worst one, he actually takes initiative to leave her. He like travels for work, like goes to another country for work. He makes that effort to be away from her. He like acknowledges that I need to get away from her. I need to be away from her. And so obviously, again, you don't get to see that in the movie because of time's sake. But I thought that was really interesting as well. And obviously this isn't necessarily how all relationships are like. Obviously, if this was written without that like sympathy and gray area, we might have seen him getting even more angry, not let her leave, etc. So that's why I think this book is very much in the gray area. So continuing on, I think in general, as far as the relationship goes between Ryle and Lily, like obviously there was abuse in the situation. But what I thought was really interesting was how much banter they had and chemistry they had as characters. There's many times where I genuinely saw like the love between them. A lot of funny back and forth. Like they actually had what seemed like a decently solid relationship until they got into fights. And I feel like that wasn't translated as well from book to movie. I don't know if it's the timeline, because this book doesn't necessarily tell you how long it's been since the beginning, but you know things are moving pretty quickly. So I think they were trying to do with that, so it's harder to show their fun side of the relationship. I think if anything, they focused on the sexual side of their relationship in the movie versus their more romantic, playful side that's more seen in the book. So I kind of wish I saw that more. Obviously, I heard stuff happened on set, so that could have been one of the things that was cut, or just not able to be accomplished, depending on how our 2 main actors felt about each other. But that's hearsay. We don't know what happened fully. But yeah, I just kind of wish more of that chemistry was there. I just didn't feel that nearly as much in the movie. Also, what I think was really interesting about the book is how much Lily fires back at him, particularly when a fight is over. In the moment, she shuts down. I think as a lot of us would, if you're being like physically attacked or scared that you're going to be. But after the fights are over, she goes in on him. She swears at him. She yells at him. She criticizes him. Like, any fear she has of retaliation is not enough to stop her from showing just how mad she is that he had the audacity to hurt her. And we didn't get any of that in the movie, and I thought it was so awesome because in the book and the movie that Lily grew up watching her parents have this abusive relationship. Father was very abusive to the mother in the book and the movie as well. And so she acknowledges in the story how much she hated her father for what he did, how much she was angry at her mother for staying. Like, she had all these emotions with her parents and just could not understand how she could stay in it. And I think that bubbled over into, she could, one, acknowledge that this is not how you're supposed to be treated, because she saw how her mother was treated and thought that was awful and didn't want that to happen to her. So I think you had all this anger bubbling up in those moments, and she was hurtful, but it was completely justified. And you got none of that. It felt like in the movie, it was like stone cold. I'm not going to speak to you. I need my distance. We're not going to talk about it. Like, she wasn't angry enough. And I just think seeing that backstory, seeing her anger at what her mother had gone through, I wish we had that anger in the movie. That's something that I think they should have kept in, because there were some really powerful, angry moments. But then again, at the end of the day, maybe that just wasn't what they were aiming to show. I think that there was definitely other more impactful lines she had that were told, not necessarily while she's shouting, but when she's calm. So maybe that was that as well, just trying to balance out the emotions. But I loved that she was able to yell at him. I absolutely loved that. So there's also, like I said, there's this previous relationship with Atlas, who was like basically first love, high school sweetheart, that ended really badly after her dad found out about it. So she didn't have any sort of closure. She didn't know if he was okay, if he was alive, where he ended up. And so she still had some emotions. I think as anyone would if someone you knew, loved, just sort of fell off the face of the earth. Like, of course, you'd be wondering what happened. Where are they now? I mean, I think about that for people that I still keep up with. Like, I wonder what they're doing. So I especially related to her in that. And there was such sweet moments in which Lily just very bluntly was like, why did you not come back? Like, where did you go? You said you'd find me, but I haven't seen you in who knows how long, you know? And so I think there was a lot of that sweetness that we also lost in book to movie translation. There was a lot of very sweet, genuine moments. And obviously, like, the author and the movie obviously wasn't trying to necessarily show that she was going to develop feelings all over again. So I think they're trying to walk a very fine line. Try not to show that, like, she's actually going for Atlas, that she actually needs to deal with her own stuff, figure everything out beforehand. But I wish I saw a little bit more of that in the movie, because it was very sweet. I like reminded of it because I read this twice now. So when I got reminded of that, just how sweet it was to, like, remember all those things and get some closure on that. So I really enjoyed that, but obviously it just probably, again, wasn't one of those things that they could include because they were trying to tell a very specific story. I think they were more focused on the domestic violence than anything. Kind of moving from a different angle here, I really did not like Alyssa and Marshall. Those are two characters, like side characters. That's Ryle's older sister and her husband. I did not like them in the movie, like, at all. but I enjoyed them in the book. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that these characters are written as like they're outsiders, first of all, so they don't quite know everything. And they are comedic relief many a times. But Alyssa really stepped up in the book as like a friend. She could see right through Lily. She was really connected with her. And Marshall too, like there's a point in the book where Ryle even asks Marshall, "Can you come along when I talk to Lily, because I want you to be a bystander so that Lily feels safe speaking to me after what I did to her." And so there's just a lot of like things like that where you see a more serious side of these characters, where they are genuinely wanting to help and be there for Lily, and supporting her, while also dealing with the fact that Ryle is the brother and the friend, and obviously they're walking a fine line, but they were just more supportive and still comedic, but not in an overbearing way. And I felt all of that character development was just lost in the movie. In the movie, I felt like they were just sort of funny characters who had maybe one line that resonated with Lily and the audience, and then they were sort of brushed off and never really seen again. And I don't like that. I didn't like them. I found them kind of annoying in the movie. Their presence just like wasn't necessary, even though they're major players in the book. So I just wish that they handled their characters a little bit better. Obviously I'm going to ask Sebastian about this as well, but they were just so more developed and had more of a purpose in the book and more involved in it. But in the movie, they just weren't there. They were just there for a laugh. And it wasn't my favorite. I think, too, what was missing from the movie to book was there is this really, really nice scene in which Lily is speaking to her mother about what happened. And it's a necessary conversation. It's very necessary. Like, from mom to daughter, woman to woman, trying to explain, like, this is what my husband did to me. And so I thought that was very impactful. I think it actually added a lot of closure to that, arc of her feeling all these emotions of why did my mom not leave, And so they had this very important conversation about why women stay, why it's hard, why, like, how she ended up in this situation. She talks about how she had a limit, and then that limit was broken away bit by bit, and how it's very easy to fall into it and to stay trapped in that situation when there's love involved, when there's a child involved. And so I feel sad that wasn't able to be included in the story either. We were so focused on Lily and Ryle that this whole major conversation and closure with her mom just wasn't there. We didn't have that conversation. I just really enjoyed how her mom and her came together to really talk about what happened and get that closure at the end of the day. And I'm just sad that wasn't included in the movie. But I think that's why I'm rating this book higher than when I initially read it. Because now I feel like I can get into it a little bit more and really appreciate the story arc as a whole. So yeah, like I said, I gave this book a 4-star. I really do enjoy it, but it's a hard read. It's a hard read for me. I don't usually enjoy reading sad, dark books. And this one has some dark moments, So like I said, viewer discretion advised, because it can be a lot, but I think it's an important read. Have reservations what you will about the author. But I think as far as a story that she wanted to share that happened with her parents specifically, I think this is really well written. And I think it begins very important conversations about domestic violence and how easy it is for it to happen and to fall into that without even realizing that that's what relationship you're in. Because there's just so many times where you just love Ryle. You love him as a character, despite knowing that what he's doing is wrong. You end up really feeling for him, and that's It's hard. Obviously, if you don't have empathy, then you're fine. But if you have empathy and can feel for his character, you can understand why it's so difficult to quote, make the right decision, whatever that may be. But I really enjoyed this book. I'm glad that they made it into a movie. Not because I think this is the most well-written book on the planet, but again, because it's a topic that I think is worth talking about. So now, before I continue talking about the movie, we will cut to that. Here is what Sebastian and I thought of It Ends With Us.
Hi, it's me.
Welcome to the It Ends With Us book and movie review.
Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing me into Booked.
Yes.
This is the second episode I'm on.
Yes, it is. Go check out the first episode, like I said at the beginning of this episode. Quickly, before we continue, to clarify our surroundings, if you go listen to our episode before this one, we are on our honeymoon.
I know.
Right
We got
now.
married.
We just got married. So definitely go check out our previous episode if you want to hear how it all went and a little
All the tea.
fun wedding movie rankathon that we did.
Yeah.
So definitely go check that
That's a
out.
good name.
But It Ends With Us.
So, as you know, I don't read.
Correct.
So I have not read this book. But I've watched the movie.
Mhm.
And looking forward to the movie was a very interesting topic because there was a lot of hate going on in social media because of the cast not fully addressing the issues or the subject matter of the movie. But from an outsider's perspective, I was watching the trailers, I was watching as much as I could, and in my eyes, some of the actors were definitely messing up, not addressing anything at all, and just acting as if it was a full-on rom-com. But in my eyes, it was still a romance movie.
Yeah.
Just happens to be like, listen, romance comes in all shapes and forms. This is just sadly one of them.
Because it's not all sad. There is a whole nother
Yeah.
person
And you feel
involved.
hopeful. You see
Yeah.
their beginnings, and you see the flashbacks
Yeah.
with her being younger. Like, there's a lot of love, and even with the abusive main character, there is still love in there. It just develops into something really toxic, which I think is really important to address
Yeah.
as a society, because people that are victims of situations like this can see themselves on the screen, and I understand it could be triggering for some, but for others it might seem like the light at the end of the tunnel and show them the fact that they can be strong and they can get through it.
And they can get out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But going back to all the controversy, looking at the trailers and looking at the IMDb, you can see the trigger warnings. You can see the fact that this is definitely a movie with abuse. So I personally was ready, but just doing some quick research about it. But I definitely understand how it was mishandled by the cast, most of the cast.
Yeah, as I was like reading it, because I had already also known pretty much the whole, like, a majority of the plot of the
Yeah,
book even
you
before I
weren't
even
too
started
surprised,
reading
obviously.
it. So I knew what I was getting myself into. So I guess that's just something that I would recommend. Just in general, look up the movies, especially if they were a book. Look up what that book is about. Because with subject matters like this, like, these movies definitely should be made. Because they start really helpful conversations, and they can provide support for people that have gone through these things, but you also need to prepare yourself for what's happening. I think I said in the book part of this review that, like, the whole thing, there has some very triggering moments, and there was some moments that I was nervous to see on the screen because they were hard to read through. But I think the movie did well of not shying away from the reality of the situation. And while the situation might come off as, like, unrealistic in some senses, I think the progression of what happened makes a lot of sense. I think the jealousy that was experienced
sure.
was incredibly realistic. And at times valid. I think that's what also makes this movie interesting, and the book interesting too, is that this is not black and white. I think I said
Mm-hmm.
this before. Like, there's so much gray area. And the author specifically wrote this from looking at her parents' relationship and
Yeah.
what happened with them. So this is not a end all be all. This is
For
not just
sure.
one relationship. Obviously, some relationships are more violent. Some relationships it's more subtle, and it might just be insults instead of
Verbal abuse,
physical
mental
abuse.
abuse.
So,
And to your point, yeah,
yeah,
like some of the jealousness was definitely valid. The reaction is never valid.
exactly.
Never.
Yeah.
Off the bat.
But I think that's where the movie did a really good job,
Exactly.
is because it made you feel for both sides.
Yeah.
And there obviously was like a cutoff where it's like, okay, this is
You gotta
unforgivable.
stop.
Gotta stop.
Like once is enough.
Yeah, but I think that's what I enjoyed, because the director Justin Baldoni, who plays the abusive character, he was talking about how he wanted the audience to fall in love with his character because it gave Lily's character validation for why she stayed to
Yeah.
begin with.
Like I understand why you're fighting for this relationship, because he does look like a nice guy.
Yeah, and there were positive qualities that you saw in him. It was
Like
a
the meet
pretty
cute
accurate
was
one.
definitely a meet cute.
Yeah, it was pretty accurate.
But from the get go you could
yeah.
see how many anger issues he had.
Yes.
Just coming into
there was
this
red
balcony.
flags,
Exactly.
and it was the same red flags. Like I was just about to say, it's incredibly accurate, like book accurate. The only thing that I didn't enjoy was just some characterization of the side characters. I don't know how you felt about the sister and her
I
husband.
really liked her.
I did not like them at all in the
No?
movie. I
Why?
hated their characters, actually. I think they distracted from the whole thing. I would rather have them not have even been in versus just this like comedic relief. I did
They were
not
a little
enjoy
bit of
that.
a comedic relief, mostly the husband and her, but I think her character is fully validated when we come to the part of her being
When
of
she
Lily
needs
being
help.
abused,
Yeah.
and the sister being like, as a sister, I will ask you to please forgive him and give him another chance, but as your best friend, I will never speak to you again if you go back to
forgive
him.
Yeah. So yeah.
So I think that moment specifically,
and that was
gave her
also
all
in
the
the
credit.
book, which I appreciate. But I think my main issue is that their characters kind of fell off at a certain point.
Yeah,
And because
they
they were
did.
so focused on like the comedic relief of their characters, we didn't get to see any of them also being helpful. Like there's this whole sequence in which Ryle comes to speak to Lily, but the sister's husband is also there and is like, I'm right here. I'm going to be right outside the door. If he starts acting weird, I'm going to come in and I'm going to take Ryle away.
Yeah.
And like, so they were supporting her so much, even in like the subtle ways. And I understand that they couldn't even like include that scene in the movie. But it was stuff like that that I wish I saw more. Like not just like the sister being helpful, but the husband too. They're trying to keep him in check. And there was really some really nice intricacies with the way that Lily and Atlas's relationship was, the other potential love interest. There was much more like discussion of their past. And while I understand not wanting to focus on it because you want to focus on the main relationship that she's leaving from, I really enjoyed seeing Lily.
You kind of want to see why she's still hung up on this guy.
Exactly. Like you want to see why it's such a big deal.
And I think one of the issues that relates to that is the fact that the timeline was so quick. Like the sister is pregnant. I feel like the sister's pregnancy was longer on screen than Lily's own pregnancy. Like she was pregnant and quickly.
Yeah. But I mean, the book is similar.
Yeah.
It all happens really quickly. And I think that's also an important thing to touch on, how like it, like you, once you get like comfortable enough, things can escalate very quickly, especially if there's a trigger like jealousy. For instance, any other trigger, like things happen so quickly. And what I thought was really well done is the editing of the movie. And in particular parts when abuse is happening. So when the abuse happens the first time, when you see it in real time, you end up kind of confused. Like, I'm not quite sure what just happened.
Insane.
Versus when she's reflecting on it later, you can see, oh, he did shove her down a flight of stairs. Oh, he did hit her across the face. And you don't realize that till she accepts that is, in fact, what happened.
Now, I have a question based on that, but looking back at when we watched the movie, for example, when he gets his hand burned and quickly goes and punches her in the face, the first time we see it, we're pretty much literally seeing what we want to see and remembering what we want to remember. I seriously thought that he touched the hot stove
And reacted.
and then just reacted and
Exactly.
punched her accidentally.
No.
But then we remember it, and you see that he did burn his hand, but he looks back and then
because
swings.
she started laughing.
He winds
Yeah.
up and swings.
Yeah.
Which is completely different.
Because I guess he justified it like, oh, you were laughing and it was like I had just burned my hand and how dare you laugh at me? So he like slaps her, even though she's drunk and she thought the situation was funny because in some ways it kind of is. And she didn't deserve that at all. Yet suddenly she's being hit. So her brain remembered it differently. And also it happened so quickly. It's hard to even know, especially because she was inebriated, exactly what happened.
I think the shoving down the stairs was pretty similar in the memory and then the other one. Like you can definitely see him shoving her.
The cut to black.
But then to my question, so when you have a movie, you just do the action and that's done. When you're writing a book, you have to make this action come across by means of text. Is it really descriptive? And how is it different, the description, from the memories to like the second time you see it and you realize what actually happened?
So what happens in the book a lot is like this internal monologue that's happening where I think you can tell immediately that she is aware of what just happened, but then but like this and this and this and he was just upset, or I was just like this, or oh no, he's becoming like he's like my dad, and like no, he's not becoming like my dad was worse, and there's all these different things where because there's this whole plot point too that I think I mentioned in the book review, of her grappling with trying to understand why her mom stayed. Because that relationship was significantly more physically abusive. Yeah. And she had a lot of anger at her mom for staying, that I think prevented her from understanding the situation that she was in, how it was a similar situation. Because it was like, it's not as bad as my dad. So he, by default, can't be abusive.
He's as good. He's better.
He's better because he's not hitting me as hard, or he hasn't tried to rape me yet. Like, those justifications, like you saw more in the book, which I think added a depth to it because you actually can see like the generational trauma, whereas in the movie I don't think you have enough time to go into all that detail.
But then it does become really impactful because we do know that the mom was abused, and then we get to the last part with them on the couch, and it's just that part is really uncomfortable. It really feels like it should not be there. Yeah. But it's also really strong to see her remembering. And there's this phrase that is like, those who don't know their story, their history, are bound to repeat it. Yeah. She knows exactly what happened to her mom. And based on that, she's able to break free from that.
Yeah, she does not want to continue that legacy.
She knows what happens next.
When she finds out like she's pregnant, she's like, okay, thinking clearly now, separated from him, do I want my child to see this and think that this is either like acceptable or normal or how it's supposed to be? Or can she take advantage of the fact that she's away and stay away? I think that was really important because so many people are like, well, you have a kid now. Yeah. You don't want to raise them divorced.
And that's one of the most powerful scenes of the whole movie. Yeah. The giving birth scene.
When she gave birth at the very end, and Ryle's holding his daughter, and she's like, well, if her husband did these, if she goes to you and says, Daddy, my boyfriend or my husband did what you just did to me, what would you tell her
to do? And she was like, I will tell her to leave him. Yeah. And he understood that. Now, this move was both really a show of strength, but also show of smarts. Yeah. Because he has his baby in hands, so he cannot retaliate with the baby in there. But also, regardless, she's doing this right there and then. You just gave birth, and you're telling him you want a divorce,
which is crazy, but it's also the right time.
Oh, for
at
sure.
At the exact same time. I do really enjoy that, and I'm glad that they kept that like 100% how it was.
When she went about it, my jaw fully dropped to the ground. I was waiting for
you to see that part.
Because he was literally like, you're right.
Yeah.
I get it. And he was like, I'm gonna go get help. Which, by the way, you told me that in the books he was already getting help beforehand.
He mentions very briefly that like as part of like backstory that like the author gave him, like he accidentally shot and killed his brother when he was like
Yeah.
6 years old, and he admits that he knows he has anger issues and has been to therapy since like the shooting, but either therapy just didn't really do enough,
Or he
or he
wasn't fully targeting
stopped,
it.
wasn't really absorbing it. Like you can go to therapy and get nothing out of it if you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to get anything out of it. But he did mention that, so I think that gets like touched upon it again in like
Yeah.
the sequel book.
But I
About
think that's
him
the
getting
best
better.
possible outcome of this story, because not only does she get a better life that she deserves, he is also on a much better path now, because it's not like she got revenge by making him suffer. She got her good end, and he got help.
He at least acknowledges
Yeah.
how badly things went. Like some people need to hit rock bottom.
Exactly.
And I'm glad that that's kind of where the story was. He needed to go to rock bottom where he lost what he wanted, basically, a wife and a kid, a daughter. He's not with them. He does not get to be with
Exactly.
them. She says, you're not even going to be around her until she can talk. And he needed to see that. He needed to see just how bad it was.
But then the other great ending to this part is the fact that she did not go to, what is his name? The other
Alice.
guy? She did not go to Alice right away. She didn't bounce and was like, okay, Alice, hi, how you doing?
Right. She
was a
kept her
babe.
time to heal, to just focus on raising her daughter and becoming a mom, and then she was ready to have another like meet cute with Atlas, which is really nice. And also, it stopped you from thinking, oh, he was totally justified in his jealousy.
Yeah, like she definitely was into him.
Right.
Yeah.
And you could see that, but but by not running into Atlas's arms, I think it helps.
It shows that she wasn't trying to.
It wasn't because of Atlas that she wanted to leave. Whereas if
Exactly.
she ran into his arms, it would be that opposite.
Yeah.
But it was incredibly accurate. I think the things that they cut out, I understand it was for time's sake. I definitely recommend reading the book if you enjoyed the movie, because you'll get a lot more depth. I did not like the sequel nearly as much. It was not that memorable. But I still enjoy this story.
Funny enough, before we watched the movie, my aunt told me that we needed to watch the movie because she really liked it. But she told me that the movie was much worse than the book.
As in bad?
She read the book.
Oh, she didn't like the movie.
She didn't like the movie as much as the book.
I mean, fair. I feel the same way. I like the book a lot more. I think the things that they cut out are what made the book so much better.
And it's also interesting because my aunt read it in Spanish, and I for what I've heard, Colleen Hoover is targeted as not really a great author in the way she writes.
Yeah, I have not heard good things about her other books, but this book I think is quoted to be her best.
So it will be really interesting for a bilingual person to read it in both languages and see how much it differs and how much it changed the language of the author.
Definitely.
I think overall, out of 5 clapping boards, I will give it probably a 4.
Yeah, 4 is fair.
Because I'm really into rom-coms. That's something that Caitlin loves about me.
Yeah.
I would go to watch a rom-com with her. But this was more of a drama romance than a rom-com. So because of that, it loses a couple points. But I think 4 is pretty stable.
Yeah. I think overall, it was a solid adaptation.
Yeah.
Like I said, the things that were missing, there's a justification for it.
Boston.
Gotta love Boston as the setting. We get to see like our home place.
Some parts I was just like, where is that?
Right. Also, I gotta mention this. I do not like the costuming.
Yeah. And they're supposed to be younger.
They're supposed to be younger. She's supposed to be like 23.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be like, Raul's supposed to be like 26, 27, because he's like an actual like surgeon, like late 20s. So I wish that they casted younger people. I think the young Lily that they hired could have been just the actor throughout.
Normal one,
because she was fantastic. But it's not like Blake Lively did a bad job either.
I mean, she's a great actress.
I just
it's
wish...
It's just not the fit.
Yeah, I wish she was younger. I wish she had a more accurate clothing style, because that clothing was atrocious. Yeah. I hated almost all the costumes that she wore.
Even the fact that she went to the gala or to the party with a beautiful dress, with a camo
huge
jacket
puffer
on top.
Okay. No, thank you.
And then, come on, Colin Hoover. Lily Blossom Bloom. Could you be any more in the face?
Literally.
Not even good. But anyways.
That's just being nitpicky. The rest of the movie was fine. I liked the plot. Yeah. I liked the progression. I think it is definitely a well-written book. I would recommend it. Obviously, check your trigger warnings. You've obviously been spoiled here. So hopefully you already know kind of what you're getting yourself into. But I think it's an important movie, and I'm glad that it was made. I know the director, is glad that he made it too. Mm-hmm. Despite any and all drama that may or may not be involved on the set.
You want to send us off?
Oh, gosh. Do I remember all of our handles?
It's your episode.
Well, thank you all so much for coming to see another episode of Booked, my little mini series. Go make sure to check out the other Booked episodes that I've done. I'll make sure they're all linked. I don't know what's coming soon. Percy? I'm hoping Percy could be fun.
Percy.
Especially since it's confirmed season 2 is coming out. But we will see. I definitely want to talk about Bridgerton soon, so I've read 2 of the Bridgerton books.
We might speak about Harry Potter again once the show comes out.
Yeah. And what is that, 2026?
Yeah.
So we got time for that. But I always have a lot of fun doing these book to movie reviews. I hope you all enjoy them as well. You can follow us on Instagram at @AndCut the podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at caitlin.mp4.
You can follow me on Instagram as sebi.mp4.
We also have a TikTok called That Film Couple. That's the same as our YouTube, That Film Couple. We post a lot of vlogs on YouTube. And we have other fun videos on TikTok as well. So make sure to go check us out there. We do have a Twitch, although we need to play more games.
Oh, yeah.
Gosh, give us more games to play.
That's Sebas Parra 1K.
Yes. But yeah, and if you are watching this on YouTube, we also have this podcast available on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts.
Well, all podcast platforms.
All podcast platforms. Of course, and cut the podcast. But thank you so much.
No, that's and cut !
Oh, very specific. And cut ! This is why you do the going out. But thank you so much for joining us again on another episode, and we will see you in the next one.
And
cut!